Okay, inshallah, we'll go ahead and begin. We don't have the projector, but I will let you all see what's on the screen. This little screen, if you can see it. So we'll go ahead and begin. Bismillah, inna alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh, wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu, wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. Amma ba'd. So tayyib, we're continuing with the book of Al-Imaam Ash-Shawkaanee, Al-Imaam Muhammad ibn Ali Ash-Shawkaanee, Ad-Durar ul-Bahiyyah, في المسائل الفقهية. And so last week we began Kitaab al-Salah, we began the chapter of the prayer, and we took the first section of that, which was Bab al-Mawaqit, the section that dealt with the timings of the prayer timings. Okay. So now we're going to Al-Bab al-Thani, the second section in this chapter, which is Bab al-Adhaan, the section of the Adhaan. Okay. And so we'll go ahead with what the Shaykh said, rahmatullah alayhi, rahimahullah. He says, Bab al-Adhaan. يشرع لأهل كل بلد أن يتخذوا مؤذنا ينادي بألفاظ الأذان المشروعة عند دخول وقت الصلاة. So he said, so it's legislated, meaning the adhan, it's legislated for the people of every land that they take someone, they appoint someone, if you will, to be the mu'adhin, to be a mu'adhin, one who calls the call to prayer. Yunadi bil alfaz al-adhan al-Sharee'ah, who gives the call for the adhan according to the legislated wordings of it that have been legislated, which means the wordings from the Qur'an, from the authentic sunnah, the authentic hadiths. Inda dukhuli waqt as-salah, at the times, the beginning times of the prayers, or the times that the prayers enter or begin. Okay. So tayyib. So he says yushra'u. He says it is legislated. Okay, that's how we would translate that. Yushra'u li ahli kulli baladin. It is legislated for the people of every land. So in the footnotes it says bel yajibu. Rather it is. He's saying yushra'u is legislated, but to be more specific, it's wajib. Okay, he says bel yajibu li qawli Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam li Uthman bin Abi al-As radiyallahu anhu wattakhidh mu'adhinan la ya'khudh ala adhanihi ajran. Rawahu Abu Dawud wa Nasa'i wa Sahih al-Albani. So he says it's obligatory. He says even though the mu'allif, the author, is saying yushra'u li ahli kulli balad, it's legislated for the people of every land. He's saying rather it's to be more specific about its hukum, because when we began this fiqh class a month or so ago, or a couple of months ago, we talked about these ahkam, that in fiqh there are different laws. Everything has a hukum for it. Okay, it may be wajib, it may be mustahab, it may be mubah, it may be makruh, it may be haram. It may be the thing may be sahih or batil, etc. These are ahkam. So everything has a law for it. Everything has a ruling for it. What its ruling is. What is it? Its legislative ruling. Okay. So particularly for this matter of appointing someone in the land to be a mu'adhin, meaning if the Muslims have a land, the Muslims are living in a land, they're living in a group, in a community or society, what have you. He's saying it's obligatory upon them to appoint someone to call the adhan for that land, for that area. Okay. And he says the proof of it, due to the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said to Uthman bin Abi al-As radiyallahu anhu, who was one of the companions, he said to him, and he commanded him, he gave him a command, he said, وَاتَّخِذْ مُؤَذِّنًا لَا يَأْخُذْ عَلَى أَذَانِهِ أَجْرًا. He said, take a mu'adhin, appoint a mu'adhin who does not take any pay for his adhan, for calling the adhan. So the point, the angle of him using this as a proof to say it's wajib, is something that goes off into another science that we're not studying now, which is called usul al-fiqh. And that is that al-amr, the command, in general, it leads us to understand that thing is wajib. A command, leads us to understand that thing is wajib. Unless there's something that to show that there was something contradictory to it, to show that amr, sometimes a command could be for istihbab, for recommendation. But he's using this as a proof here to say that it's obligatory because the Prophet commanded it to this when he spoke to him. All right. So moving on, he said going to the next part, he says, وَيُشْرَعُ لِلسَّامِعِ أَنْ يُتَابِعَ الْمُؤَذِّنِ. Okay. He said, and it's legislated for the sami', the one who is listening, the one who hears the adhan, and yutaba'a al-mu'adhin, for him that he follows or repeats the wording of the mu'adhin. Okay? So regarding this, he says, بل يسن وتعبير بقوله يشرع أعم من التعبير بيسن فيدخل فيه المباح والمراد هنا الاستحباب خاصة فتعبير بيسن أدل على المقصود والله أعلم. So he says, so here again, Al-Imaam Ash-Shawkaanee is saying yushra, okay, meaning it's legislated. This thing is legislated, okay, for the person who hears the mu'adhin, the person calling the adhan, to follow after him, to say, repeat what he says, repeat what the mu'adhin says. What mu'adhin says, Allahu Akbar, then you say Allahu Akbar. Mu'adhin says, Hayya ala-salat. In that case, the Prophet said something specific about that, and then you say, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. But for the other wordings, okay, besides Hayya ala-salat wa Hayya al-falah, those two wordings come to the prayer and come to success. The other wordings of the adhan, the Prophet gave the command that you follow, repeat the wordings of the mu'adhin, okay. So he's saying that now regarding this, the hukm regarding this, to be more specific, he says yusanna, which means it's recommended, okay. It's from the sunnah. It is sunnah. When he's talking in the fiqh sense of fiqh now, the fiqh terminologies, okay? And let me point out something here too. This is something important to mention. Sometimes you hear people say, well, brother, it's sunnah, okay? Do I have to do, well, it's just sunnah, brother. They'll put that word, it's just sunnah, okay? So we have to distinguish when we use this term, this wording sunnah, are we talking about the technical terminologies of the fiqh scholars in this science of jurisprudence, fiqh, or are we talking about in the legislative sense of Islam as a source of the Islamic legislation? Okay, so and I've heard some of the scholars saying that it's somewhat unfortunate, we'll just say, that the same terminology was used and it confuses people because some people will say, well, you don't have to do that, it's sunnah. When they're saying it's just sunnah, they're saying it to say you don't have to do that. That's the meaning behind it. Well, we're supposed to do something. Says, yeah, but it's sunnah. They're saying it, say, you don't have to do it, okay? But when we talk about Islam in the legislative sense, in the comprehensive sense of what are the sources of Islam and what is the revelation, the revelation that Allah gave, subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we know there's Al-Kitab. Allah gave the Prophet the Kitab, the Qur'an, and he gave him the Sunnah. The Prophet said, Ala wa inni utitu al-Kitab wa mithluhu ma'ahu. He said, verily I was given the book, which is the Qur'an, wa mithluhu ma'ahu, and something like it along with it. He's talking about the Sunnah, okay? He's talking about his Sunnah. That is not optional. It's not optional for you to follow the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The source of the Sunnah are the authentic hadiths, okay? The authentic statements, commands, approvals, actions, deeds of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay? Those things, it's not optional. You can't just say, well, the Prophet just said to do it, so I don't have to do it. It's just sunnah. No, that's not what it means, okay? In that sense, it's obligatory for everyone to follow the sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Every Muslim, it's obligatory for us to follow the way of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah commanded us in the Qur'an, in many places in the Qur'an, Allah says, Ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul. Obey Allah and obey the Messenger. He said, وَمَا أَتَاكُمَ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. Whatever the messenger gives you, you take it, you do it. And whatever he tells you to abstain from, you just not to do, you abstain from it, okay? These are verses from the Qur'an, okay? So following Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not optional, okay? And we call that following his sunnah, ittiba' sunnah, following the sunnah. That's not optional. That's a part of Islam. That's a part of our religion. That's part of what we mean when we say, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Part of that is that I will obey his commands. I will stay away from the things that he has forbidden. I will, believe in him in what he has informed me of, etc., etc., okay? So that's following his sunnah. But now when we talk about the science of fiqh, this particular ilm, this science within the knowledge of Islam, there's a branch of knowledge, okay, that's called fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, okay? And within that, some of the scholars use this term, sunnah, to refer to something that's mustahab, min bab al-istihbab, something that is recommended, or they say mandub, okay? They would use this term sunnah, okay? So like people say after you pray the obligatory prayers, and then there are some sunan prayers. Sunan is the plural of sunnah that you can play. Meaning they're optional, nawafil, they're optional. They're not obligatory, tatawwa, we say. They're optional, okay? But that's not the same as meaning we have to follow Prophet Muhammad or not, No, it's obligatory to follow Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not an option. That if the Prophet commanded us to do something or said don't do something, you don't have the choice to say, well, it's just Muhammad saying it, so it's just sunnah, I don't have to do it. No, that's not correct, okay? So he's saying here about this where Al-Imaam Ash-Shawkaanee, the author, says, يُشْرَعُ لِلسَّامِعِ أَنْ يُتَابِعَ الْمُؤَذِّنِ It's legislated for the one who hears the muadhin to repeat his wording. He's saying to be more specific, it's sunnah, meaning it's recommended, okay? It's not obligatory, not wajib, okay? But to be specific about what is the ruling within the legislation about repeating after the muadhin, okay? What is its ruling in fiqh? It's recommended, okay? And he says, and his saying, using this expression, yushra', this is more general. You know, he says, وَتَعْبِير بِقَوْلِهِ يُشْرَعْ أَعَمُّ مِنَ التَّعْبِير بِالْيُسَنِّ. He's saying the saying yushra' is general, it's legislated, but it's not saying specifically, yes, it's legislated, but is it wajib, is it mustahab, is it mubah, those things. So he's saying it's more specific to point out that it is recommended, okay? And he says, so وَالْمَرَادُ هُنَا الْإِسْتِحْبَابِ خاصة. So specifically what he's saying here, what he means here is that it's recommended, istihbab, okay? So moving on, in reference to him saying it's recommended for the listener to follow or repeat the wordings of the one who's calling the adhan. He says, لِقَوْلِهِ, due to the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, إِذَا سَمِعْتُمُ الْمُؤَذِّنَ فَقُولُوا مِثْلَ مَا يَقُولُ وَصَلُّوا عَلَيَّ فَإِنَّهُ مَنْ صَلَّى عَلَيَّ صَلَاةً صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ عَشْرًا ثُمَّ سَلُوا اللَّهَ لي الوصيلة فإنها منزلة في الجنة لا تنبغي إلا لعبد من عباد الله أرجو أن أكون أنا هو فمن سأل لي الوصيلة حلت له الشفاعة رواه مسلم. So in this hadith, he's bringing a hadith to prove his statement, saying that it's legislated for us, or it's recommended for us to repeat the wordings of the muadhin, because the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that is in Sahih Muslim, he says, when you hear the muadhin, then say what he says, repeat what he says, and then pray for prayers of blessing upon me. For verily whoever sends prayers of blessing upon me, then once, a single time, Allah will send 10 prayers of blessings upon him. And then ask Allah for me al-wasila. Ask Allah for al-wasila for me. Okay? And he says, for verily wasila, it is a position, a status in al-Jannah. It's a manzila fil Jannah. Okay? He says, la tanbaghi illa li'abdin min ibadillah. And it's not allowed, it's not going to be allowed for anyone except for a single servant from the worshippers of Allah. Wa arju an akuna ana huwa. And I hope that it will be me. The Prophet is saying this to his companions. I hope I will be the one who will be given that position. So he says, so whoever asks for al-wasila for me, this status for me, then my intercession will be allowed for him. I will be able to intercede for that person. Okay. So this is talking about a dua that you make after repeating the words of the muadhin, because the Prophet is saying, say the word, repeat after the muadhin. Then after that, then send prayers of blessing upon me, and then ask for this status for me. There's a discussion I'll mention for this dua. There's a specific dua of the Prophet, the wording that the Prophet gave for this dua. And I'm trying to remember, what's the wording after the adhan? Allahumma rabba hadhihi ad-da'wati at-tamma wa salati al-qa'ima ati Muhammadan al-wasila wal-fadila wa ba'athu maqaman mahmudan alladhi wa'adtahu. Okay? But there's an extra wording, innaka la tukhlifu al-mi'ad. Okay? The scholars differ about this additional. I'm glad you mentioned it. That's why I was trying to get somebody to say it.
Some people don't.
There's a difference of opinion about it. Shaykh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, one of the great scholars of hadith at this time, if we don't say, just say he's the imam of hadith of these times, may Allah have mercy upon him. He considered that ziyada, that extra wording, to be weak, da'if. This ziyada is not ghayr sahih, not authentic. So he did not suggest that you add that in the la tukhliful mi'ad. Verily you do not abandon break your promise. Verily you do not break your promise. Sheikh bin Baz and Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen considered it to be correct and valid. Okay, and Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen, he was discussing this. He was asked this question about this additional wording, innaka la tukhliful mi'ad, verily you do not break your promise, added at the end of that dua, this supplication. And he said, I heard, and he didn't say the names, he left the names out, but he said, I heard the person who was the one who was promoting this, that this was unauthentic, this addition. I heard Sheikh bin Baz, I was present when Sheikh bin Baz was refuting him regarding that, when they debated about it. And he said, after listening to what bin Baz said, was saying to him, he said, I have certainty in my heart that Ibn Baz was correct and that person was wrong. But he didn't say who the person was, but I have an idea who it is. But he witnessed them arguing, debating, not in a mean way, but just having some munaqasha, some discussion about this edition. So so Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen said, after hearing Sheikh bin Baz refute the other scholar about it, he said that this wording it's correct to add it. Innaka la tukhliful mi'ad. Allahu ta'ala alam.
what do you prefer, to leave it or say it?
Myself personally, I have not been saying it, and I've been Muslim, a couple of decades. And after I heard that from Sheikh Al-Albani, I stopped saying it. Okay, but after I heard Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen explaining this, I'm not harsh against someone who says it. Okay, you know what I'm saying? It's not that big a deal. I mean, for those who say it, you know what I'm saying.
It makes sense to me that I don't need to remind God that
Mm-hmm.
this is something I don't need to mention to God.
I mean, yeah, if you don't want to say this is the point. With this, it's a dua, okay? So I wouldn't approach it from that angle, from that aspect of, well, let me just see, does it make sense? Because these type of things, when you get into the wahi, the revelation, you're not going to be able to figure that out just with your own aql, okay? I'll give you an example. For example, there's a hadith where the Prophet was telling one of his companions a dua to say before going to sleep, okay? And he said, when you make wudu, and then you lay on your right side, and then you say this dua. And in the dua, he said to him to say, "Amantu bika wa bi nabiyyika alladhi arsalta." This part of the dua, it's a long dua. Wajjahtu wajhi ilayk wa fawwadtu amri ilayk. The dua goes on, and towards the end of it, it says, "Wa amantu bika wa bi nabiyyika alladhi arsalta." The Prophet told the Sahabi, he said, say in the dua, "I believe in you, Allah, and your Prophet who you sent." And so then the Prophet, and the dua goes on. Then he had the Prophet, he had the Sahabi repeat the dua back to him. And while he was repeating it, he said, وَآمَنْتُ بِكَ وَبِالرَّسُولِكَ الَّذِي أَرْسَلْتَ. And the Prophet said, لَا تَقُلْ رَسُول قُلْ نَبِيِّكَ. You see? But how could he, okay, a Rasul is a Nabi. You can't be a Rasul unless you were first a Nabi. So it's not wrong, logically with the aql, but the Prophet told him here, no, don't say Rasul, say Nabi. Why? Because this is wahi, it's revelation, not something that you let, well, does it make sense to me? No. You follow the nusus, you follow the revelation. What did Allah say? What did the Prophet say? How did the Prophet say to say it? You know what I'm saying? So it's not, don't go approach it from that angle. But rather, if you believe that the narration is authentic, based upon what you understand from the scholars of hadith who've explained that, its authenticity, then alhamdulillah, go with that. If you read the argument of the others and you it feels like it's stronger to you based upon what you understand, then go with that. Labas, no problem. Just know that there's a difference amongst the scholars about it, and don't be harsh about it. If you hear someone saying, "Oh, that's bid'ah," don't say that. Don't do it like that. Because those scholars, they have their proof also. Okay, regarding those chains of narration to support this hadith. And alhamdulillah, we have a brother here, Jibril. He studied at the University of Medina. He has a bachelor's degree in hadith. So inshallah, maybe in the future or after class or whatever, we can ask him to give some more if he has some information he can give us about this. Or if you know now, you have something you want to add to it. Right, it's Allah, right, also, yes. So Allah does say this in the Qur'an also. So it's not something that, it's not logical because Allah says it about himself in his book, But basically we just, stick to the narration. Like I said, I myself, I've been under the understanding after I read what Sheikh Al-Albani said, I followed that, I heard what Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen said regarding what Sheikh Al-Albani said and what happened, that situation. But I didn't hear that dispute. You know what I'm saying? I just heard Shaykh Uthaymeen's conclusion about that dispute. So it doesn't give me as much yaqeen as me reading myself what Ibn Baz said about it. Or if I had heard the dispute, maybe I would have the same yaqeen that Uthaymeen had, rahimahullah. But I don't. But at the same time, I understand that, okay, the scholars differ about it. And these are two great imams of Islam, great scholars of Islam. May Allah have mercy upon both of them. Well, they differed about that, but it's not something that made them not, to fight each other, or we're not brothers, or this guy's a deviant because he said that about that hadith. No, it's not to that extent. So, Allah Ta'ala alam, Allah knows best. So, I just want to mention that there since we're talking about that. So then the next thing he goes on, he says, ثُمَّ تُشْرَعُ الْإِقَامَةُ عَلَى صِفَةِ الْوَارِدَةِ. So then it is legislated to say the Iqaamah in the manner that has been reported, meaning in the authentic hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so he brings a narration. He says, "An Anas radiyallahu anhu," it's reported from Anas, may Allah be pleased with him, that he said, "Verily the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded Bilal to say the words of the Adhaan in even numbers, in even numbers, okay. And he commanded him to say the Iqaamah he said, "Wa yutiru al-Iqaamah," make the Iqaamah in odd number, singular. So, for example, in the Adhan, the Muaddin, he'll say, "Hayya ala-Salah, Hayya ala-Salah," okay? This is Shafa', it's twice, double, okay? And he says, "Hayya ala-Salah, Hayya ala-Salah," like, okay, "Hayya al-Falah, Hayya al-Falah," is doubled, okay? But in the Iqaamah, he only says it once. Hayya al-Salah, hayya al-Falah. Like this, okay? So it's just pointing that out. Then also, like for example, at the beginning of the Adhan, the Mu'adhin, he says Allahu Akbar 4 times. Whereas in the Iqaamah, he only says it twice, okay? So, and there are more detailed narrations about this. If you can look into the books of Hadith and the sections regarding Salah, and you will find the descriptions of specifically the exact wording. But he just brought this one narration just to show that the wording of that the Prophet ﷺ commanded to make the Iqamah, that he commanded, and that's the point he's bringing. He says, "Inna Rasulullah ﷺ amara Bilal," and he commanded Bilal to say the Adhan like this and the Iqamah like that. So he's saying because it's a command, then that's why it's obligatory to say it, because he gave Bilal that command, okay? This hadith was reported by Al-Imaam an-Nasa'i in his Sunan, and Shaykh Al-Albani declared it to be Sahih, okay? So, another point I want to mention, let me ask you all this before we go on, because that's it for the section of Adhan. We're going to go on now to Bab Shuroot al-Salah, the section regarding the preconditions of the prayer. But I want to ask you all something. What about the Mu'adhin making the Adhan, and he's wearing shoes? Is that permissible for him to wear shoes while calling the Adhan? I'm bringing this up because this was asked before in a previous class, and none of those same people are here, so we'll discuss it again. Different set of people here. The Mu'adhin calling the Adhan, and I'll tell you why. This is a situation that happened. I was traveling with a group of brothers from the Aqeel files, from my real life stories of a Muslim in America. We were traveling, and so we stopped on the road at one of those rest stations because we wanted to pray. It's time for Salah. We're on the road. We're going to a different state, whatever. So we stopped to make Salah. Okay. So one of the brothers started calling the Adhan, okay, for us to pray, and he was wearing his shoes. And one of the brothers who was with us, who was not calling the Adhan, he was from Afghanistan. That may not have anything to do with the story or not, but I just went from what I remember. He was very upset. He became and they're like, what's wrong with so-and-so? Astaghfirullah, A'udhu Billah, look at him. He's making an Adhan with his shoes. We have to call the Adhan over again, So what do you all understand about that?
He understood that, you cannot wear shoes and make an Adhan.
That's true. Okay, that's a valid observation. Do you all have that same understanding, or have you heard anything about that?
Well, if you can pray with your shoes on, then obviously you can make the Adhan with your shoes on.
No. You all agree with that? He said if you can pray with your shoes on, then you can make the Adhan with your shoes on. Is he right, Aslan, with his original statement? Let's go back to what he's establishing this upon. Is it correct that you can pray in your shoes? Yeah, this is correct. The Prophet actually, he even commanded it. There are narrations where he commanded to do this. It's from his sunnah to pray in the shoes. Okay, so of course, like you said, what's the exception though? What's the condition the Prophet gave to that though? There was a condition he established with that, praying in the shoes. What shouldn't be on the shoes?
A time frame or a time before? No, the shoes.
The shoes themselves.
Like, there's a condition for the shoes. You don't pray in them.
Can I pray in the shoes and they have dog feces on them? They should be pure of any najasat. And we talked about this earlier in Kitaab al-Tahara, Bab al-Najasat. What are the najasat? These things like, dog saliva, feces, human feces, animal waste, and things like this, urine, any of the najasat, those impure things that we talked about. So of course, the Prophet, said to check the shoes, check the shoes. If there was anything impure on them, then you wipe it off. You can wipe it. He said you can clean it by wiping it on the ground. Okay, and then he said, and pray in them. Okay. And in another narration, he was praying, and he was praying in his shoes, and the companions were also praying behind him. They were praying in their shoes. And during the salat, he took off his shoes. And so the companions, they took their shoes off too. They saw him, and he's the Imam, he's leaving, he took his shoes off. They took theirs off during the salat. So then after the prayer, he asked them, why did they take their shoes off? They said, well, we saw you taking your shoes off, so we followed, we took ours off too. He said, no, I only took mine off because Jibreel informed me that there was I had some filth, some impurity on them, and so I removed them. But he said, no, you pray in your shoes. If there's nothing impure on them, you pray in them, okay? So following your line of reason, which is good, which is, acceptable for sure, that if you can pray in the shoes, then, why can't you call the Adhan in the shoes, the other thing is there a dalil, is there a proof to say that it's prohibited to call the Adhan in the shoes? Is there evidence, is there evidence for that? So if the person he's promoting this, he's saying you can't make the Adhan in the shoes, okay? So then it's upon him, since he's making the al-bayyina al-mudda'i, munkir al-yameen, the one who's making the claim, he has to produce the bayyinah, the evidence. It's upon him to produce the dalil. It's not on me. It's upon him. He's asserting this. Okay, so it's upon him to. Okay, I'm listening to you. Continue with your dalil. Well, I don't have any. I just don't like it. Well, that's not just because you don't like it, or we don't do that in my country. That's not a dalil. That's not evidence. Just because you don't like it, or you didn't see anybody in your country doing it. That's not proof. That's not Qur'an and Sunnah or statements of aqwal al-sahaba. Like Al-Imaam Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyya rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, Al-ilm qala Allah wa qala rasuluhu wa qala sahabatu. He said, knowledge, as Allah said, the Prophet said, and the companions said. The companions were doing. What came from them. That's ilm. That's dalil. That's burhan. And Allah says in the Qur'an, قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Bring your burhan, bring your evidence if you're truthful. So no, we don't know of, and Allah Ta'ala a'lam, I don't know of, and I don't remember there being any evidence mentioned from any of the Salaf, Imams of the Salaf from the, what I remember studying when I was in school or otherwise, other than that, of anyone saying that that's a condition of calling the adhan is that you have to take your shoes off. It's not, okay. Tayyib, you had your hand up about something.
Go ahead.
Good. Tafadhal.
We talked here about repeating the adhan. The Iqaamah, we are not required to repeat it.
Do you know of a dalil about repeating the Iqaamah? I don't know of any dalil about repeating the Iqaamah. Also, what I hear some people doing that I have heard from the scholars is not from the Sunnah, is innovation, is at the end of the Iqaamah, they will say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. They repeat, when the person who's the muqim, the one who's making the Iqaamah, after he completes the Iqaamah, then the people use La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah. Yes, this also. But there's no evidence for these things. There's nothing authentic to support doing that. Okay, it's not. There's nothing authentic. As far as repeating the words of the Iqaamah, I don't remember anything specifically about it right now. Allah Ta'ala a'lam. If I find something, I'll let you know when I come next week, inshallah. The ruling of the adhan itself. Just at the beginning, yushra'u, where he says, when he's talking about the adhan, yushra'u, he says, bal yajibu, wajib. He's saying it's obligatory. He says, li ahli kulli balad, for a place. So, in other words, if there's a group of Muslims living together in a land, in an area, whatever, he's saying it's obligatory for them to appoint someone to call the adhan for them, for the times of the prayer, in the dukhul waqt as-salah, at the time of the entrance of the prayer. Okay. Trying to think, it was something else I was going to say about that. Was that what you were asking about what he said? Yes, he says bel yajibu. He said rather it's obligatory. Even though Ash-Shawkaanee says yushra'u, the Sharee'ah of this book, Sa'd ad-Din al-Kubbi, he says bel yajibu. Rather it's obligatory.
Did you get into even like if you're at home or you're alone?
He doesn't hear. But there is a narration. I can't remember which book of hadith it's in, but I remember that Shaykh al-Bani graded it authentic about the person who's the sheep herder, the person who's out by himself like this, and I can't remember the word in the specific lafz of the hadith, but it's something. The Prophet also mentioned something virtuous for the one who's out by himself, out in a barren area with a herding sheep or what have you, and when the time comes for prayer, he performs his ablution and he calls the adhan, and then he makes the adhan for the prayers, and the hadith goes on. So that guy's by himself. He's not at a masjid, and the Prophet. So, but is that obligatory? As far as I know, it's recommended. From what I heard how to explain this hadith, that it's min bab al-istihbab, not min bab al-wujub. Meaning if you're by yourself somewhere, or you off somewhere, and there's, you don't have a mu'adhin, you're not in a place where there's a bunch of Muslims, whatever, that it's recommended to call the adhan, but it's not wajib, not obligatory, This is from what I remember. This is from what I remember hearing about it. But Allah Ta'ala a'lam. Yeah.
About Iqaamah. Can you pray the 5 times before, like, one Iqaamah?
No, each salat, you should make an Iqaamah for that salat. You should make an Iqaamah for that individual prayer, okay? And for example, when the Prophet, he mentioned either uqimat as-salat fala salata illa al-maktuba. Okay, when the iqamah is given for the prayer, then there's no prayer except for that obligatory prayer. It's talking about for that particular prayer, an iqamah will be made for each individual prayer, not just one iqamah at the beginning of the day and then you don't for the rest of it. For each prayer, you make the iqamah. The other thing is regarding. I'm surprised no one asked yet about women. Okay, that's a common question. Are women supposed to call? Is there an adhan or an iqamah for women? Okay, what about the women? Sheikh bin Baz And also Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen said, both of them said the same thing regarding this, that it's not legislated for the women to call the Adhaan or the Iqaamah. It's not legislated for them. It's permissible for them to call the Iqaamah, but it's not something that's for the women to do. And particularly the Adhaan, they said no, because it requires the woman to be raising her voice, and the woman should not, be raising her voice in the presence of non-mahram, ghayr maharam, people who are ajanib, people who are not related to her like this. And then if that goes into other, some people ask, okay, well, is the woman's voice awra? And Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen said, no, it's not that her voice is awra. There's no evidence, no dalil to prove that the voice of the woman itself is awra, okay? But still, it's better for her to refrain from, I'm trying to think of how he explained it. He was saying like that the woman, her voice may, for someone like Allah mentioned the verse in the Qur'an about the Prophet's wives, about them lowering them, not speaking in a way that's noble, honorable, lest there may be some people who have sicknesses in their heart, okay? They have some marad in their qulub, in their heart, and they may just lust after them, okay? So that the woman should, try to, if she has to speak to men, she can. It's permissible. And Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen mentioned in the time of the Sahaba, the Sahabiyat, they would ask the Prophet for what their needs. They would ask the Khulafa after him. They would come to them and ask them for their need, and they would speak to the men in the marketplaces as needed, according to the hajj, according to their need. Okay, but it should only be out of necessity, and it's only be out of necessity. Okay. And it should be in a manner that is not sweet. They shouldn't make their voice sweet or soft like this, okay, when dealing with men, and only according to what's necessary. So, but then now look at calling the adhan, or singing the adhan even, that's not for her to do in front of other men or like this, okay. But the wording that I remember them using is that it's not, the adhan and the iqamah are not legislated for women, okay. This is legislated for men, okay. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best. Tayyib, was that we can move on. Okay, tayyib, we move on. So we're going to Shuroot al-Salah, the preconditions of the prayer. Okay, so he says, Bab Shuroot al-Salah, وَيَجِبُ عَلَى الْمُصَلِّي تَطْهِيرُ طَوْبِهِ وَبَدْنِهِ وَمَكَانِهِ مِنَ النَّجَاسَةِ. It's obligatory upon the person who's going to pray, who wants to pray, to make salah, that he cleanses, make sure that his garments that he wears for the prayer are clean, okay? And his body is clean, and that his makan, the place that he's going to pray in, is clean, min al-najasat, from any impurities, okay? So, in other words, from the preconditions of the prayer is that on your thiyab, your garments, on your badan, your body, okay, and on makan al-salat, the place of the prayer, they should not have impurity on them, okay? Should not be feces, urine, any of those things that we mentioned, dam al-hayd, menstrual blood, menstruation, blood of menstruation, all these things that are considered impure things, okay? Lu'ab al-kalb, the saliva of a dog, these type of things, okay? Those things must be cleansed from they must not be on your clothing or your body or your place that you're going to pray. Those three things. Remember those three things, okay? And he says, وَيَسْتُرُ عَوْرَتَهُ, and the person should conceal their awra. The person must conceal their private, their parts of their body that should be concealed in public or kept private in public. So in the notes, what he says about this, in reference to where he says, تَطْهِيرُ طَوْبِهِ, cleansing, his garment must be cleansed. He says, لِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى, due to the statement of Allah the Most High, where he says, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, and your garments, so your garments, cleanse your garments, okay? In Surah Al-Muddathir. Then he says, وَلِقَوْلِهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ لِأَسْمَى رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهَا, due to the Prophet's statement to Asma, may Allah be pleased with her, she asked the Prophet ﷺ about the garment that has menstrual blood on it after her menstruation. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, scrub it, pour water on it, and then wash it diligently. And then he said, ثُمَّ تُصَلِّ فِيهِ, then you can pray in it. That's showing that you have to cleanse the impurity from the garment. This hadith is muttafaqun alayhi. It's in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Okay, and then in reference to him saying وَبَدْنِهِ, also his body must be cleansed of any impurity. Due to the Prophet, he says this is due to لِأَمْرِهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم بِالتَّنَزُّهِ min al-bawl. This is due to the Prophet's command that the person has to be careful of getting urine on their sprinkling of urine on your clothing. Why? Because if that happens, you can't pray in that garment until it's cleansed, or else you have to change that garment. You can't pray in a garment that has pee on it, And then in reference to him saying وَمَكَانِهِ, in reference to the place of the prayer, that it must be cleansed of impurity. This is due to the Prophet's statement regarding in Sahih Bukhari regarding the man who entered the masjid and he passed urine in the masjid. The Prophet he told them to pour water over the place where the man had urine and to cleanse it, to cleanse the spot, showing that there should not be impurity on the place where you're going to pray. It should be removed. It should be cleansed. Okay. Then in reference to, he says the person must cover their awrah. The person must cover their awrah. Okay. He says, وَالْعَوْرَةُ داخل الصلاة ما بين السرة والركبة بالإضافة إلى المنكبين. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يصلي الرجل في ثوب واحد ليس على عاتقه منه شيء متفق عليه. So he says, in reference to the awrah, what should be concealed of the man when he's in prayer, it is what is between his navel and his knees. And included in that, he says, are his shoulders. His shoulders should also be covered when he's in prayer. He says, this is due to the statement of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, none of you, no man should pray in a single garment without having anything on his shoulder, anything on his shoulder. Okay, this hadith is in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. And he says, وَعَوْرَةُ الْمَرْأَةِ the awrah of the woman, what should be concealed of the woman, داخل الصلاة, while she's in the prayer. He says, كُلُّهَا مَا عَدَى الْوَجْهِ وَالْكَفَّيْنِ. He says, all of her body except for the face and her two hands. وفي الحديث, and he said there's in the hadith of the Prophet where he said لا يقبل الله صلاة حائض إلا بخمار رواه أحمد وأبو داود وصححه الألباني في الإروى. So he says there's a hadith of the Prophet, so he said Allah does not accept the prayer of a woman who has reached the age of menstruation, meaning she's reached the age of puberty, unless she's wearing the khimar, unless her head is covered. He's mentioning that. But also let me make this point. Some of the scholars, they hold the position that the woman must cover all of her body except for her hands and her feet in the prayer, including her feet. Okay. Sheikh bin Baz held this position. Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen held this position. Of the scholars today, also Sheikh Salih Al-Fawzan holds this position that the woman, even her feet, must be covered also while she's in the prayer. Sheikh Muqbil bin Hadi Al-Wadi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the scholars of hadith from Yemen, may Allah have mercy upon him, he differed with them on this. He said because the narration about it, he said, is not authentic. It's not authentic. It's not authentic to the Prophet ﷺ. It's not authentic as being marfu' to the Prophet ﷺ. Where the woman asked, was it Salama? I can't remember. Was it Salama? About the covering the feet. I think it was Salama. But he says this narration being marfu' to the Prophet ﷺ, he said it's not authentic in that way. Okay. So he says, according to him, Sheikh Muqbil said in his fatwa book, Ijabatu Sa'il ala Aham al-Masail, this is the title of the book. He said, so according to me, since there's no clear evidence regarding it, I say that the woman it's okay if the woman prays with her feet uncovered, if she's not in front of men who are not related to her. It's la ba'sa bihi. He said it probably would be safer, ahwat, aslam, if she covers her feet. But if she doesn't, he said there's no problem because they don't have a clear, strong proof to say that she has to cover. The feet have to be concealed. Allahu ta'ala a'lam. But it would be safer, as even he said, it would be safer if she covers her feet. Now, so moving on. So the next thing he goes on to, he says, وَلَا يَشْتَمِلُ الصَّمَّاء وَلَا يَسْدِلُ وَلَا يُسْبِلُ وَلَا يَكْفُتُ. He says that the person must not tightly wrap themselves inside of a garment. He's talking about such that their hands cannot come out of the garment. This is called a samma. Okay? He says, لا يشتمل الصماء. Okay? The person should not, that's wrapping oneself in a cloak or something like this, and you can't even get your hands out of it. This is how he's describing it in the footnotes. Where you can't, it's like wrapped up in, like, let's say a blanket or something, you wrap it around yourself because it's cold, and you can't even get your hands out of it. Okay? This is what that is. That's not permissible. There's a narration from the Prophet ﷺ prohibiting that. Okay? وَلَا يَسْجِلُ. Okay? This, he says, سَدْلُ الثَّوْبِ عَلَى الْكَفَتَيْنِ مِنْ غَيْرِ مُخَالِفَةٍ بَيْنَهُمَا وَهُوَ مَنْهِي عَنْهُ. Okay, so he's talking about here letting the garment hang from the shoulders without tying it up at the neck or anything like that, but it's just dangling on each side. Okay. Also, Imam Ash-Shawkaanee described it in his explanation of his own book, Ad-Durar ul-Bahiyyah, his explanation of Ad-Durar ul-Bahiyyah. In the footnotes, he described as the person lets the garment hang and it's just hanging on his sides, Jambul Yamin wa Shimal, like this, but it's not fastened. It's just like hanging from him. Also, in Lisan al-Arab, it talks about another explanation of it has been that the person puts the izar on the middle of it on his head, and he just lets it dangle, and it's not even touching his shoulders, it's dangling down like this, hanging down. So there's a different definition of what they said this sadl was, okay. But apparently it's either letting the garment, like having like a cape, that's just cloak, just hanging off your shoulders, just hanging down like that, or putting it on your head and just letting something hang down like that. That's not acceptable to do, because there's a narration where the Prophet ﷺ prohibited that. Okay. And then he says the next thing, وَلَا يَكْفُتُ. So the explanation of this is, he says, that excuse me, I'm sorry, let me go to that. وَلَا يُسْبِلُ, the person should not practice isbal. He said isbal izar or sirwal. This is letting the lower garment, the izar, if it's I guess in Yemen they say futa, this towel, this waist wrapper, loin cloth, however you want to call it, waist garment. Or he says sirwal, like pants, They should not be, he says, إِرْخَاؤُهُ تَحْتَ الْكَعْبَيْنِ. It is letting it fall below the ankles, falling below the ankles. لِقَوْلِهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم, due to the statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, مَا أَسْفَلَ مِنْ الْكَعْبَيْنِ مِنْ الْإِزَارِ فَفِي النَّارِ. Ruwahu al-Bukhari, based on the hadith of the Prophet. So there are many narrations like this. He's just bringing one, example, where the Prophet said, whatever falls below the two ankles from the garments, from the lower garment, then it is in the hellfire. Okay, so it's not permissible to pray in a garment that is dragging on the floor. You may see, we're men. We be honest with each other. We come for Jumu'ah, we come for Eid, we come for the Salat. We see their brothers will be standing on their pants legs. The pants legs will literally be on the floor, or they'll be literally standing on them. They'll be bunched up all around their feet on the floor. It's really not permissible to do this. Not permissible. It's not permissible to do that. Okay, but he's making a condition in reference to the prayer. He's talking this. We're talking. Remember what bab we're in. We're in bab Shuroot al-Salah. Imam Ash-Shawkaanee is considering this of the Shuroot of the prayer. Well, it's a shart to even enter the prayer, that you should not have your garment below the ankles like that. Okay, and then the next thing he says, wala yakfutu. This keft like this. This is rolling up the garments, like rolling the sleeves up. That's one thing with the garment. The other thing with the hair is to tying the hair. So this is how he described it. He says, regarding the hair, it means one thing, and regarding the garment, regarding the thobe, it's tashmiruhu, it's rolling it, or tucking it, rolling it, folding one part of it into the other part, like this. And regarding the hair, the sha'r, he says rabatuhu, it's tying it. Okay, so it depends on what you're talking, whether it's the hair or because the Prophet prohibited both, doing this keft for the hair or for the garment. Okay. And in reference to the hair, he says the reason for that is because he says it leads to, he says, adma tarkiha tasjudu ma'a ada'ihi. It prevents the hair from being able to, for someone who has long hair like me, I can't tie my hair. It's like somebody, with long hair, they should not tie it up so that it doesn't, to allow it to fall down on the ground, so that it will touch the ground with his, he says, tasjudu ma'adahi, so that it can prostrate along with his limbs. That's what he's saying, like that. Okay, for someone who has hair that's that long, most men don't have hair that's that long. Even Jabril, his hair is long, but it's curly. I don't think it's flowing like that. So but anyway, so going on. So
in regards to the garment, I heard that it was also during the Salah as well, as when they're, sometimes if people are about to make sujood, they'll begin to gather their garment together.
Right, gathering it? No.
So, does that fall under the same,
I want to say I heard something like that too, but I'm not sure. I remember, like you're saying, like gathering the garment to go, like gathering up the thobe to make, or the visht or whatever to make, yeah. I remember hearing something like that too, but I'm not certain, not sure about it. I'm not really. But I definitely know. Now, I have heard that Sheikh bin Baz issued a fatwa saying regarding rolling the pants leg. Because people know that, regarding the sleeves, rolling the sleeves up, you shouldn't pray. This kafet is talking about that. They said, well, what about garments? It's saying garments in general. What about the pants legs also? Sheikh bin Baz, he said it includes that too. He said, so you shouldn't roll your pants legs in the prayer. Okay.
it comes between letting it go down?
Yes. Now, yeah, I've heard that asked also. What if the person's pants legs are too long, or if they don't roll them, he will be practicing isbaal. He will be musbil. They said, well, he shouldn't be wearing pants that are that long anyway in the first place, But he said, but if he has to choose between the two, then he just has to let them fall on the ground. He should not roll them, So and how some people they do when they'll come to the prayer, they roll them up. Then after the salat, they roll them down. But this is not from the legislation of Islam. I mean, the isbal is in the salat. It's not like don't do isbal when you're in salat, but out of the salat it's okay to be musbil. No, it's the prohibition, the nahi of isbal is during all times. It's am. It's not just khas. It's salat. For the prayer. It's in all times. A man should not wear garments that drag below his ankles. Okay, that's just being honest with you. Matter of fact, there's a narration in Sahih Muslim where the Prophet, he said there were three people that Allah, he said, لا يكلمهم الله يوم القيامة. Allah will not speak to them. ولا ينظر إليهم. He won't look at them. ولا يزكيهم. He won't purify them. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. And they will have a painful torment. And of them, he says, musbil izaru, the one who lets his garment fall below his ankle. And he didn't specify it for prayer. It wasn't just in the prayer. Okay. And there are also narrations of some of the Sahaba, like Abdullah ibn Umar. he was into the masjid and his garment was hanging. The Prophet told him to raise it. He wasn't in salat. He just came into the masjid. The Prophet told him raise it, and he said he kept telling me more, increase it, more, zid, more. He said, and he kept doing that until wasala ila nisfa saqi, until it reached up to the middle of my shin. And in another narration, he said, izratul mu'min ila nisfa saqayhi, the lower garment of the Muslim, the believer, the mu'min, he said, izratul mu'min ila nisfa saqayhi, the lower garment of the believer reaches to the middle of his shin. Okay, and then he said, and if he refused, then he can be lower than that, but it should not go below. He said, well, ma asfala min al-ka'bayn fahuwa fi an-nar. He said, if you want to let it go down to the ankle, that's fine. It can be below that, but whatever's below the ankles, then that's in the fire. The Prophet said. Okay, there's too many authentic hadiths, not just one hadith. There's a whole bunch of hadiths from the Prophet about this. It's not something that's, and really, to be honest with you, the prohibition about letting the lower garment drag, or letting this Isbaal that we're talking about, letting the garment be below the ankles for men, the prohibitions, the wordings, the alfaz of the hadith of the Prophet in the nahi of it, and prohibiting it, is more severe than even the beard. A lot of people think about, oh, well, you have to have a beard. If you don't have a beard, you shaves. But okay, if you think that's haram, the Isbaal, the Prophet, listen to what he's saying. Allah won't speak to you on the day of judgment. He won't purify you from your sins. He won't even look at you, And you will have a painful torment. The Prophet didn't say that about the beard. He didn't say anything near like that about the beard. Okay? So the prohibition of Isbaal is more severe than shaving the beard even. Okay? A lot of people don't know that, but the reality, if you compare those narrations, it's more severe, and it's even if you look in Imam al-Dhahabi's Kitaab al-Kaba'ir, it's in there. The book of the Al-Imaam al-Dhahabi, rahimahullah, he compiled a book of the major sins. What are the major sins? He listed about 70 major sins he listed in that book with the adillah, with the evidences, with the verses from the Qur'an and the authentic hadiths that prove that the Prophet gave it, or Allah or His Messenger ﷺ gave a harsh, prohibition against saying something very mean, like this person is not of us, this person is not of the Muslims, this person is not of me, I have nothing to do with him, this person will be in the hellfire, whatever, blah, 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 this person will not enter into the paradise. Hard words that are severe like this. Those things show, this is of kaba'ir, this is a kabira. This is not something that's, small, little sin, So this Isbaal is mentioned he mentions it he includes it amongst these kaba'ir, amongst the major sins, not of something that's just light, like, somebody biting your nails, something like that, or, which I'm not saying biting your nails is sin, but I'm just saying it's not something light like that, So anyway, we're moving on. No. Right, if it's no. Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen was asked about this. He said, well, because there's a narration where Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, when the Prophet said a similar narration about warning against letting the garment hang below the ankles, Abu Bakr told him, he said, well, ya Rasulullah, O Messenger of Allah, sometimes my garment falls down. If I try to tie, but sometimes it falls down. I'm not aware. The Prophet said, yeah, but you don't do that out of arrogance, out of pride, arrogance. Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen, he said, regarding this, he said, well, the Prophet is saying that to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and the Prophet knew Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and it's not that Abu Bakr intentionally wore his garment like that. See, people try to use that hadith as a proof for them that, see, I can let my garment hang because Abu Bakr let his. Abu Bakr was not saying that. He's saying, I try to tie it, but sometimes it falls down, and I have to pull it up, The Prophet said, yeah, you're not doing it out of arrogance. But Abu Bakr did not make that his habit that I wear my garment below like that. I just wear it dragging. You see what I'm saying? He's saying sometimes it falls down. If I don't pay attention, it falls down, so I have to pull it up, But so the point is that Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen is saying that was not the style. Abu Bakr was not wearing that as his style with his garment dragging. That's the one thing, number one. The other thing is, he said, if you're not doing it out of arrogance, then why don't you wear a garment that's not below your ankle then? If you're not being arrogant, if you don't have some pride about this, then why are you making an argument about it? Abu Bakr is saying, the Prophet said he wasn't prideful about it. But the person was arguing, well, why are you being so mean about this? Why are you being harsh about it? Abu Bakr let his hang. No, he didn't. It accidentally fell, and he pulled it up, And the other thing is, if you're not prideful about it, then why are you arguing with the hadiths? Just do what the Prophet said, too. Don't be arrogant. Yeah. So, inshallah, the point is clear, inshallah. But, so then he goes on. He says, وَلَا يُسَلِّ فِي ثَوْبِ حَرِيرٍ. Okay? He said the person should not pray in a garment that is made of silk. Okay, وَلَا ثَوْبِ شُهْرَةٍ, nor in a garment. Shuhra is like a garment of strangeness that makes the person stand out as irregular. like this. That's I don't know, ostentatious. I hear they use the word ostentatious. Something that's, I don't know, a big purple cone head, kufi with a glittery turban and stuff like that. This is shuhra. It make you stand out in front of, make you popular, and make everybody look at you. Like this. This is shuhra. Okay. And he said, وَلَا مَغْصُوبٍ, nor a garment that is maghsoob. He said this يعني masruq, this garment that is stolen, that you acquired it illegally. You took it and it was not yours. Okay. So the garment of silk is for the Prophet. He prohibited, he forbade silk for the men of his ummah, and he mentioned this in the authentic hadith. He said that these he held some gold in one hand and silk in the other. He said these are permitted for the women of my ummah, but they're forbidden for the men of my ummah. Okay. Also, he brings a narration from the Prophet where the Prophet said, "لا تلبسوا الحرير فإنه من لبسه في الدنيا لم يلبسه في الآخرة." متفق عليه. He said, "Do not wear." Just talking to men, of course. Do not wear silk, for verily, whoever wears silk in this life, then he will not be allowed to wear it in the hereafter. And the Sharee'ah, he's saying, the explainer in the footnotes, he's saying, وَيَجُوز مِقْدَارُ أَرْبَعَ أَصَابِعَ. It's permissible to wear silk that if it's just like 4 fingers within the garment, okay? Due to lima rawahu Muslim an Umar radiallahu anhu, due to a hadith that's reported by Umar from the Prophet sallallahu radiallahu anhu. He said, "Naha Rasulullah sallallahu an labas al-harir illa mawdi' isba'in aw thalatha aw arba'." He said the Prophet prohibited wearing harir, silk, except for if it's only a spot on the garment that is only 2 fingers width, or 3 fingers width, or 4 fingers width, like this. Okay. And he says, وَقَدْ سَحَ عَنْ Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما أنه قال, is authenticated from Ibn Abbas that he said, may Allah be pleased with him, إنما نهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الثوب المصمت بالحرير. The Prophet only prohibited the garment that is pure silk, that is like only silk, like pure silk. Okay, he said the Prophet's prohibition of that is we're talking about the pure silk garment. Rawahu Ahmed is reported by Imam Ahmed and is authentic. So he says if the silk is more than that amount, the most that has been mentioned is the 4 fingers width, then it is forbidden. Okay, it is considered forbidden for a man to wear that. Okay, then in reference to the garment of a shuhra, the garment of that makes one stand out and look, strange amongst the people and draws attention. I'll say like that. He said, due to the statement of the Prophet where he said, "Man labasa thawba shuhra fi dunya lam yalbasuhu yawm al-qiyamah." Rawahu Ahmed wa Abu Dawood wa huwa hadithun sahih. So he said, the Prophet said, whoever wears a garment of ostentatiousness, I'll say, or a garment that makes you stand out as some, draws attention to you in this life, then he will not be allowed to wear a nice garment on the day of judgment, on the day of resurrection. This hadith was reported by Imam Ahmed in his Musnad and Abu Dawood, and the hadith is sahih, it's authentic. Okay. Moving on, we're going to conclude for the sake of time. We're almost finished anyway. So he says, وَعَلَيْهِ إِسْتِقْبَالُ الْكَعْبَةِ إِنْ كَانَ مُشَاهِدًا لَهَا أو في حكم المشاهد. So he said the person must face the direction of the Kaaba, the Qibla. He must face the direction of the Kaaba, okay, in Mecca, if he can see it, or if he has the ruling of one who can see it, meaning maybe he can't see it, but he's near enough to where he knows where it is. It's over there, So even though he can't see it, he has the same ruling as one who's standing in front of it, because he knows it's over. He knows where it is. Okay, all right. And he says, وَغَيْرُ الْمُشَاهِدِ يَسْتَقْبِلُ الْجِهَةِ بَعْدَ التَّحَرِّي. But the one who cannot see it, okay, then they face its general direction after making some effort to try to discern where it is. Okay, you must make some effort to try to discern where it is. You don't just say, "Oh well, I don't know where it is. I'll just pray any direction." No, you try the best. You use the sun, use shadows, whatever you know about. If you have to use a compass, if you have an app on your phone. You try your best to figure out where is the Kaaba, and you face that direction to the best of your ability. You're not the same as someone who can stand there and see it, but you just required to face that general direction. Let's say you're off 2 or 3 degrees. No harm, no problem. The scholar says it's not a big deal. It's not that you're not the same as one who can see it. One who actually can see it he's obligatory to face it. Okay, but one who does not see it, they live in some other land. Then they just do their best to get the general direction right, and they pray in that direction. There's no harm. Okay, all right. What else? Let's see if he said something else. There was something. And the proof of it, he just says basically, قَوْلِهِ لِلْمُسِيء, talking about there's a hadith called us-Salaah, the one who prayed badly. I don't know if you've heard about. There's a hadith with the Prophet. There was a man who prayed and he kept praying incorrectly, and the Prophet kept telling him go back because verily you have not prayed. And so eventually the Prophet had to talk him through what to do to pray. So of the things he said, the Prophet said to that man, he says, "Istaqbil al-qibla fakabbir." He said, face the Qibla, the direction of the Kaaba, and then say Allahu Akbar. Muttafaqun alayhi. This hadith in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. He's using that to prove that it's obligatory and it's of the conditions of the prayer that you must face the Qibla. You must face the direction of the Kaaba. Okay. So moving on. And he also, so going into the next section, actually, this is included in the next section, but really it's included in the Shuroot. If you look, it says, Bab Kayfiyat Salat, the section of how to pray, but it begins where he says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا شَرْعِيَّةً إِلَّا بِالنِّيَّةِ. It's not, the prayer is not legislated except for with niyyah. Really, that's of the Shuroot. It's of the preconditions of the prayer. You must have the intentions of what you're praying, of what you're doing, and why you're doing it before you begin the prayer. So really, that is included in the Shuroot, the preconditions of the prayer. I hope you all are understanding what I'm saying. Is it, you understand? Okay. So Tayyib, I want to mention here, if you see this last slide, that Shaykh bin Baz, rahimahullah, in his book, rahmatullah alayhi, he has a book called Ad-Durar ul-Bahiyyah li'ammat al-Ummah. Important lessons for the general people of the Muslims, for the Muslim Ummah, the Muslim community, Muslim nation, okay? And in the sixth, Ad-Dars al-Sadis, the sixth section, he talks about Shuroot al-Salat. He says, Shuroot al-Salat, hiya tis'a. There, he said there are 9 conditions of the prayer. So Shaykh bin Baz, he counted them as 9. Okay, so we'll enumerate them. Some of them are included in what we've mentioned from Imam Ash-Shawkaanee, and some of the things Imam Ash-Shawkaanee didn't mention. So this brings it all together so you have a more comprehensive list along with what we've already mentioned up to this point. Okay, so he said, Al-Islam, the first is Al-Islam, meaning the person must be a Muslim. Okay, if a kafir makes salat, one who is ghair Muslim makes salat, they can physically do it, but it's not accepted from them. Okay, what's accepted from them is that they accept the shahada, accept Islam, and make a declaration that they've left shirk, okay, worshiping other than Allah. But for them to pray and make hajj and all this, that's not accepted from them, you know. So first is to be a Muslim, to accept Islam. So Shaykh bin Baz is going all the way back to that, you know, that the person must be a Muslim for Allah to accept this deed from him. The next is Al-Aql. Al-Aql is sanity. The person must have their right mind about them. You know, in other words, if a person is praying and they're drunk and they don't know what they're saying, or the person is praying and they're not coherent, or whatever, it's not obligatory upon the insane. Like for example, if the person is majnoon, the opposite of al-aql is junoon, it's insanity. Let's say a person has some marad nafsi, some mental illness. Okay, they're not required to pray. You don't tell someone who's autistic you have to pray or else we're going to punish you. The person doesn't understand. They don't understand that. They don't have their faculties of their sense, their right senses. They're not about to have their right mind about them. So it's not obligatory upon them to pray. Okay, all right. The next is a tamyiz. A tamyiz, I always translate this as the age of discernment. Do you all know what the tamyiz is? We talked about it early in the class, and none of those people are here. So I'm going to ask you all, what is tamyiz? What is the age of tamyiz?
The age?
The age of tamyiz. He's saying a tamyiz. What age is it? Puberty? No, that's bulugh. That's the person's baligh. The person is. That's tamyiz. I'll give you a hint. Tamyiz is before that. It's before puberty.
Like 7 years.
It's 7 years old. What's the proof? What's your dalil? Exactly. This is. Fine. Okay. So the proof is, as he said, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, when your children reach the age of 7 years old, he said, command them to pray. All right. He said, command your children to pray when they reach the age of 7 years old. When they reach the age of 10 years old, spank them if they're not doing it. If they're not praying, then you spank them. If they're 10 years old and they don't pray, don't pray regularly. Okay. All right. So and then he said, separate between them in the beds too. Separate between them in the beds. Okay. So but the proof is the Prophet said, when your children reach 7 years old, to command them to pray. Meaning you're supposed to start making them make the prayers when they're 7 years old. Okay. Now, is it obligatory for them to pray when they're 7 years old? Let's talk about this. Is it wajib for the person to pray when they're 7 years old? It's more for practice. Okay. What's the proof that it's not wajib for a 7-year-old? Even though the Prophet said command them to pray when they're 7 years old. What's the proof that it's not wajib though? Within that hadith, you can get from that he didn't say to punish them until they were 10. But is it obligatory for a 10-year-old to pray then? Let's move it up. Let's say the person is 10 years old and he's not praying. Is it wajib?
I think so, because like you say, like punishment. Because of punishment? Okay, actually it's not. The reason is because, I'm just going to, for the sake of time, we're going to rush ahead. But the reason it's not is because the Prophet said, Rufi al-qalam. The Prophet, the pen that writes down sins is lifted from 3 people. Okay, and of them he says as-sabi,
A sabi is a child, hatta yablugh, until he reaches the age of puberty. Okay? All right? وَالنَّائِمْ حَتَّى يَسْتَيْقِظ, and the sleeping person until he wakes up. And the majnoon, the person who doesn't have his faculty until he becomes yafiq, and he gains his intellect, meaning yaqil, he understands, until he comes back to his senses. These three people, they're not considered sinful for leaving off things that are normally obligatory upon the mukallaf, the adult, sane Muslim person. Okay, the child until they reach the age of puberty. The insane person until they regain, come back to their senses, or they're cured from their whatever their insanity was. They come back to normal faculties of thinking. They understand what's going on. And then the sleeping person until they wake up. You're not held accountable for whatever happens in those states. Okay, all right. So the obligations become obligatory upon the person when they reach the age of puberty. Okay, but this hadith of the Prophet, what we understand from it, where the Prophet said to command the child to pray when they're 7, if they still not praying without age 10, spank them without it, is for training. Okay, it's to training to get them ready. So you don't want to wait till they reach the age of puberty and then start trying to tell them, hey, now you got to pray. They won't be used to it. It will be hard for them. It will be hard for them to try to start doing that. So instead of just making it obligatory upon you, boom, today you're puberty prayer 5 times, get up. No, start getting them ready. Gradually. Gradually in stages, get them ready. Okay, that's what it's about. That's what that's talking about. So he's saying before the age of tamyiz. He said the age of tamyiz is when it's for the person to have tamyiz, this age of discernment where they understand what's going on, they understand what is the prayer, what am I doing, that's when, the prayer is accepted from them. Okay, so you see people who have a 2-year-old or 3-year-old in the prayer row with them. Is it okay? Sure, it's fine, no problem. But it is not considered, this is not considered, they don't understand what's going on. You see what I'm saying? Tamyiz means, it's come from this word, yumayyizu. The person can distinguish what's going on. They can determine right from wrong, what am I supposed to be doing. Usually when a child is 1 or 2 years old, they're, may bow or stand with you and stuff, but they don't know why they're doing it. They're just doing it because Baba is doing that or whatever. They're looking around, whatever, playing with their hands, looking in their pocket and whatever. They don't know what's going on. So it's not haram for them to be in the row, but it's just that it's not considered, it's not a conditional for them to pray at that point. If they sit on the side, that's fine. If they can, not destroy anything or harm themselves. I remember in the masjid this one masjid that's here in Nashville, many years ago, they would let the little kids play while we were in Taraweeh, praying Salah. And man, the kids would be just doing some of everything. I remember one time we were in ruku', and this little boy ran down the row. He was running down each of the rows, sticking his finger in the buttock, in the behind crack of all the men, and you saw all the men. It was like it was like a chain, because he's running down the row, poking people in the behind, And then another year, that same year I think it was, the kids were, the imam was reciting, they had the microphone stand at that time, and the kids were trying to get the microphone. So through the whole Taraweeh, or through those whole 2 rakahs until they, after that, the imam was fighting with the kids while he's reciting. He's trying to hold the microphone stand with one hand, and the kids are trying to get it from him, and it's like, so if they're that age, many of the scholars like Sheikh Salih Fawzani and his Mulakhas al-Fiqhi, and I've heard him say this too, that when children are at that age where they disturb the prayer, then it's better to you to leave them at home. Don't bring them, because they're going to cause a disturbance to the people who come for them. The masjid is for worship, for ibadah, So he's just saying it's better if you're going to bring them and they can't be controlled, and and you don't want to beat the kids and stuff like that and be mean to them and make them dislike the masjid, But if they're there and they can't control themselves and they're distracting the musalloon, the people who come to pray and worship Allah, then it's better to have someone watch them, or if there's someone there who can watch the kids, or else leave them at home with someone who can care for them and not bring them to harm, disturb the believers who are trying to worship Allah. Okay. So anyway, that's a side subject. So moving on. So that's tamyiz. The next thing he says is raf' al-hadith, is to removing the state of defilement, which means to make wudu. The person, if they need to make wudu, if they need to make ghusl, they should be in a state of purity. The next thing he says is izalatun najasa, removing the ritual impurity, meaning like the physical things that are on you, like we said, from the badan, from the thobe, and from the malabis, and from the makan, from the place of the prayer, the body, and the garments. You should not have any physical impurities that will defile you on your body. Okay. The next he mentions is satr al-awra, covering the private parts, concealing the parts of the body that should be covered. Okay. Next he says dukhul al-waqt, the entrance of the prayer time. The time must be in. We didn't mention that. That's good to mention. That you can't pray the prayer outside of its time. You can't say, well, I know dhuhr comes in at 12:35, but my lunch break is from 12 to 12:30, so I'm just going to pray dhuhr at 12. Even though it comes in 12:35, it's not accepted from you until the time comes in for that prayer. You understand? You can't pray it before its time. Okay. And so, and then the next thing he says is istiqbal al-qibla, facing the direction of the qibla, and then he mentions a niyyah, which is the last thing that also Imam Ash-Shawkaanee mentioned. So those are just some things for us to keep in mind as shuroot, as we say, preconditions of the prayer that must be in place and we must have established before we can enter into the prayer and our prayer be considered accepted or valid, inshallah. So it's time for the, so I think it's time for the salat now. So we'll go ahead and. Is it time for already? Right. So inshallah we'll go ahead and stop. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Inshallah there's of some benefit to we all benefited. If it was something we already knew with good reminders, and if something we learned, alhamdulillah. So Aameen. Yeah.